Hello, it's Pavel with a C# homework or an exercise. And this time, well, if you want to see nested for loops in action, you came to the right video because there will be lots of them. I promise you that. We are supposed to write an app that displays the following patterns separately, one below the other. We are supposed to, of course, use the loops. All asterisks should be displayed by a single statement of the form Console.Write, which causes the asterisk to display side by side. Again, it's Console.Write, not Console.WriteLine, which would display them under each other. Each of them would be on a new line. Uh, a statement of the form Console.WriteLine can be used to move to the next line, obviously. And a statement of the form Console.Write space can be used to display the space between for the last two patterns. Because obviously you see the B, we start with the spaces here, and also here. Anyway, so we'll be basically using two characters, star and a space, and all we can use is Console.Write and Console.WriteLine. So we got a little hint here. The last two patterns require that each line begin with an appropriate number of blank spaces. All right, well, anyway, we are, like I said, going to be using lots of for loops, especially for nested for loops. So let's do them one by one. Let's start with A, of course. So as you can see, all of these patterns at the bottom or at the top, they have 10 stars. So in other words, we will need to loop 10 times. It has 10 rows and 10 columns. So 10 by 10. If it wasn't triangles, it would be a square. Well, it looks like a rectangle, but it actually would be 10 by 10. All right, so I guess we can start coding. We'll do, first of all, let's do the constants. In this case, it's going to be a string star equals star. It actually could be a character instead of a string. I'll use string because I think it has a little more functionality built in, which we may use later. We'll see. Another one is the space, which is just an empty space. And like I said, we are displaying 10 by 10 patterns basically. I mean, just because there are spaces doesn't mean that it's empty. There are actually patterns, and instead of them, so we'll need. I'll do another constant, and it will be a counter for the loops, and it's going to be an integer counter, and it will equal 10. Okay, so now I could just write all of them over here in the main method, but I will use a different method for each pattern just to make it easier. So I'll start with pattern A. So I'll declare a function or a method, public void display. I'll call it A, and here will be the body. Okay, so let me look at that again. We're doing A. So we start with 1 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, and so forth with no spaces at the beginning. Okay, so for well, this will be nested loops. So for, and I'll call it a row. So for integer r equals 0, r is less than counter, than 10. Not that, but counter. And I'm not getting IntelliSense. Let me just look at it quickly. But it's going to be r plus plus counter. It does not exist in the current context, which means that these constants counter is not visible in my method, which is because this thing is supposed to be static. Remember, main method is static, so it can all these variables declared in it are accessed only by method of the same class program, that are static. Otherwise, I would have to declare them on the top, which I could. Maybe we can do that. And no, because then I have to call the methods anyway, and it wouldn't work. Would it? Let me see. I don't think it would. If I go display, yeah, it works. Okay. All right. So in our so these are class level. These are yeah. It doesn't work that way. Of course it doesn't. Never mind. I don't know why I tried. This is like I said, this is a static method, so all the calls uh, to the other method have to be static as well. So, and it makes no difference in our case right now. This is not an exercise about like any. We could actually do this in a separate class, but let's just concentrate on making the patterns. All right, so I got the outer loop. This is still underlined, but it shouldn't be anymore. And anyway, let me finish this one. So we have the outer loop for the 10 times. And now we need to do the inner loop, which is another 4. And this one is going to be a column. So I'll declare integer column, which would be C equals 0. C is less than, wait a minute. This is not going to be counter because we don't always loop 10 times. Over here, we only loop once, then twice, then 3 times. In other words, our C will actually equal our R over here. So in other words, it is less or equal to R. Whatever the current row we are doing, that's how many stars or spaces we will be writing. R++, I mean C++. Okay, so now when we have this, all we have to do is really just console.write, and we will write the star. I don't have access to these again, and I'm not sure why. Well, of course I don't, because I would have to pass them. These are supposed to be up here, so the whole class has access to these. But my calls for these methods, which is gonna be display A. All right, so in other words, our main method will only call each of the functions to display the patterns. So I loop 10 times. Over here I loop first just once, then twice, then yeah, that is correct, I think. We'll see. And after each row we have to move to a new line, so it's going to be Console.WriteLine. All right, like this. And all right, so let me see. We got a 4. Let me run it. Let's see what we get. Okay, over here in my main method, I'll do console.readline just to post the output on the screen. All right, so let's try again. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it did work. Yeah, like I said, it's this one was fairly simple. Basically, you just write a star with each iteration. The only trick here is this part. C is less or equal to R. Remember, when you look at it, if you cannot loop, if this was counter, in other words, it would equal 10. All you would get is a square because it would do 10 of these. and then 10 of these, and so forth. But you only want one, so the first iteration you only write one star. The second, and it goes over here. Now r equals 1, so it will do 2 stars in one line, and then 3 stars, and so forth. All right, so that's our first one. I'll scroll it down so you can see the next one. It's going to be, I will call this one again, it's going to be static, public, and void, and it's going to be display B. It's going to be the B pattern, and we will call that from our main methods display B like that. All right, so what is our B now? This is the same thing but reversed. All right, so we will be, over here we started with 1, over here we started with 10, then 9, then 8, and so forth. So we will be subtracting. Over here we had we basically just started with 1 and went up. Over here we start from 10 and go down. So another nested for loop for, and it's going to be again integer r for the rows, and that's equals 0. R is less than counter. It's the same thing like the previous one. R plus plus, and inside the loop we will have another loop. But remember, now we need to start with some spaces. Not the first time, but after that we need to 1 space, 2 spaces, and so forth instead of stars. So let's do the. In other words, we'll have 2 loops actually. One that will display the spaces, and one that will display the stars. So let's do the spaces first. So for integer c equals 0, c is less than our r, just like before, and we will increase c by 1 with each iteration, and we will output space. So console.write, not write line, just write space. All right, that's the first one. Now we go and write the stars that follows the spaces. So integer c equals 0. C is less than counter, and C plus plus, and we will console.write, and we will write star. Okay, again, have a look at it over here. Over here, the first line will have 0 spaces. We'll simply write 10 stars. Over here, we'll start with 1 space and then 9 stars, and so forth. So, and we will need to move, of course, to a new line after each for loop. Actually, yes, now it will be console dot write line. All right, let me see what it does, if anything. Okay, now this is the first pattern, and this is the last one, but it did the spaces, but it also did 10 10 stars for each row. First of all, let me separate these two with a new line. So over here, when we display A, at the end, let's just display a blank space, blank line. It's not that right line, so we can see it better. All right, so let's see. Okay, so we have the first one, that's correct, like we did before. And here, what's happening? Okay, so we have 10 10 spaces. So it starts correctly, then it's 1 space, 2 spaces, and so forth. So the spaces are correct. It's the stars that are always 10 because our counter equals always 10. And like I said before, we need to subtract. And what do we subtract? Uh, we subtract the number of spaces that were displayed, which is held in our R. Yeah, that's better. Remember, we couldn't counter equals 10. So the first time it runs, R equals 0, so we subtract nothing. We run 10 spaces, 10 stars, 10 stars. The next one, R equals 1, so we'll only write 9 stars. But after our spaces always, like I said, they will increment 1, 2, 3, 4. It starts actually with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And the last number of spaces is 9 and 1 star. All right, so this was fairly straightforward as well. Let me just organize this a bit better, and let's do the display number C. So it's gonna be static, public, and void display C method or function, and I'll call it from my main method display C. Okay, so what's our C? So it's just like this one, but flipped upside down. Basically, it's flipped vertically. Okay. All right. Well, let's start with the obvious, which is our 4. And once again, let's do the rows. So first, let me see. Is it 0? Well, it cannot be 0 now anymore, I think. No, we start with 10. So over here, we will be subtracting. We start with 10. You see over here, we started with 10, but we had to consider the spaces that are kind of at the beginning of each line. Over here, there's no spaces, so we simply display this, but backwards. We start with a counter with 10, so our R equals counter. R is greater than 0. We wait until it hits 0, and R minus minus. We go backwards. We start from 10 and then go all the way to 1. Okay, and our inner loop. So that's gonna be another 4. This one will be just a regular, so it's gonna be column integer C columns. And so it equals 0. Our C is less than our R, and C plus plus. Okay, so we have this, and now let me think how this thing. We start with C. Okay. All right. So we have this, and then we simply write the typical Console.Write. And remember, there's no spaces at the beginning, so we start with star, and we'll end with spaces. And we don't really write the spaces. The spaces are simply created by, we display 10 stars, then 9 stars, but the space after that is just there. Then 8 stars, you have 2 spaces after that. You don't have to write the spaces. So this is really all. Let's do console the write line for a new line. And I think that might be all. You know what? Over here, remember how we added Console.WriteLine to move the patterns from each other because they were all they were both stuck together. So over here, let's do the same thing for each of these. So Console.WriteLine. So the next pattern starts at the new line, or there's a blank line between them, actually. So console.WriteLine. Let me see. Well, you know, let me run it. Let's see what we get. Maybe we'll be lucky. And it will work right away. All right, so we got our second pattern. Oh, look at that. Our third one is C, and that is correct. We start with 10, 9, 8, and so forth until we hit 1. Oh, we're doing good. And finally, so let's do our D. So it's going to be again static, public, void, and display D. Oh, it's a function. So over here, I'll call it from the main method, display D, like that. Okay, so now let me see how that works, how that looks. Our D, well, just like these were flipped, this is literally flipped A. So in other words, we will go in kind of like A. We start with 1 and go to 10, but we will have to account for the spaces in front of it. All right, so 4, and you already know this, R equals, but what R equals? Let's try 0. R, no. If you look at it, let me see. It'll A, when we did A, our R equals 0. So this is the opposite. So we start with a counter. Counter, so our R is a counter. We start with 10 because we need to write 9 spaces and then 1 star, 8 spaces and 2 stars. But unlike here, when these spaces over here and here, they're just simply lines that are not there. Over here we have to manually actually write those spaces. So that's why we start from 10, because we actually have 10 characters to write right from the start. So our R is greater than 0, and R minus minus. And inside, actually I don't need 2 lines because we only have one command, which is the console, and we'll write a space. So it's Console.Write. What do we write? Space we write. So we'll displace. And again, like we did with the pattern number B, with the B pattern, now we write the spaces and then we write the stars. It's the same thing. So now for C, no, I'm doing it wrong. I need the, I'm sorry. This is our main loop, our outer loop. And within it, we need to do our integer C equals 0, because we still have to, I just messed up. This is our outer loop and this is our inner loop. And C is less than R, less than R. That's what we had before. So it's, yeah, so less than R and C++. And we'll write console.write space. So these are the spaces, and we'll do the same for the actual stars. So for integer C equals 0, C is less than R. No, it cannot be, because it would be. No, let me see. R minus. We're going backwards, so R, not R. Counter minus R. That's it. We start from 10, and then each time we loop, we write less. We write more of the stars, but it's always 10 characters. In other words, this loop plus this loop always gives us 10. The only difference is that sometimes there will be more spaces and sometimes there will be more stars. So we got a minus r and C++. Okay, and console, not constant, but console.write, and we'll write the star. All right, and we have to do a new line after each row. This is not after each pattern. This is still within the outer loop. So Console.WriteLine. Okay, and we'll make a new line after the pattern. Actually, that's not even needed because this is our last pattern, but what the heck, why not? So let me see quickly. I got the counter. I start from 10. So first time it equals 10. So we will write 9 spaces because remember this is less than r, not less than equal to r. So it will be up to 10, which will be 9. So we will write 9 spaces. And then it will come here. And it will write counter minus r. And counter equals 10. R equals 10, so it's 0, so it will do only 1 star, and then this will be 8 spaces and 2 stars, and so forth. At least that's the plan. Let me see how that goes. Our first pattern, that's correct, second, third, and here's our fourth one. And that is correct, except it doesn't start at the end. Do I have 10 stars? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm missing one line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. This is 9 by 9, not 10 by 10. All right. So let me see here. R equals 10, and I need actually 10. So in other words, I need from R to equal 10 all the way to 0. Let me debug quickly. All right. So now we are hitting this. Our counter equals 10. Our R equals 10. Okay, that is correct. And see how it goes, and it loops over here 9 times, or so it should. And let me just skip that over here. Now it just displays it anyway. Since we are getting one less line, I would say so. It's 10 to 0 or to 1. Oh, so it's only 9. Remember, R is greater than 0. It doesn't go all the way to 0. It goes to 1, from 1 to 10 instead of 0 to 10. So all we have to do is just put this equal to 0. In other words, we need R from 0 to 10, I think. Yes, there you have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rows. And it's the pattern. This is pattern B, correct. I mean C, B, and A. I think we got them right. All right, that wasn't so bad, but was it? Okay, so I'm not even sure how to explain it. This is the best, write the code and debug it. See how it loops. What equals to what. Why that is sometimes greater than, sometimes greater and or equal to. Like over there. Over here you just have greater. It's less than, but over here you got less or equal to R. This is our pattern A. All right, so our pattern A and our pattern B both have equal to, and that's because we need to do 10 rows. and we start from the counter, we no, I take it back. We we need to account for the row 0, because if you have it only like this, and let me show you what happens if I have C is less than R. That's our pattern A. So that's our first one. See, it misses one row. It's only 9 rows because it goes all the way to 1 instead of 0. All right, so that's why you need 0 there. I mean equal. There you go. All right, well, I hope it helped you. Like I say, play with it. Do a little debugging, see it step by step how it loops, and you'll get this thing, to understand in no time. I mean, it's slightly complicated to imagine all these things, but you always loop through the rows like this, and you have to account for each column as well. And all we had to do is make sure that these are basically 10 by 10 each of them, but sometimes we have to actually write a space. We only write the space if the spaces are at the beginning of the pattern. You cannot start the line, move like 10 spaces away from the screen. So you have to literally write the space. But A and C, you don't have to write the end spaces. You simply write 1 star and then go to the next line and write 2 stars and so forth. You don't have to do anything with the spaces at all. All right, so I hope it helped you, and I'll see you next time. Take care.